Hi there, my name is Lexi Runquist of Arrow, and I'm going to talk you through how to create your very own indigo dye vat. So go ahead and grab your kit. I'll talk about the supplies inside in just a second, but a few things you will need before we get started. You will definitely need something to create your vat in. So I just have a dedicated pot for this. You could also use a bucket. Ideally, it's going to be something that has a cover on it or something that could be easily covered. So that's the first thing. If you want to go ahead and fill up your bucket with warm water right now, you could do that as well. You will need about a gallon of water to create your vat. Okay? One more thing you will need is a spoon or something to stir. A paint stirrer stick works well, an actual stick works well. Whatever you have on hand, as long as you can reach the bottom of your pot to stir, that's what you're gonna grab. And then just some, nice little precautionary measure. I always like to cover my surface. So I'm just using a Turkish towel that I'm going to dye eventually, and it's just gonna catch up any of the dye that would otherwise be sticking to the surface of my table. So grab those things and then we'll talk about what's on the inside of our kit. So inside of our kit here, you should see a few different items. We have a pair of gloves just to protect our hands from the dye. We have our dyeables here, so anytime you're working with a natural dye like indigo, you want to make sure that your dyeables are 100% cotton or linen, any natural fiber. So these are 100% cotton. And inside this little packet here, you should see a variety of things. First of all, you'll see two different powders. I took these out. Two different powders. This is our indigo dye, and then this is our soda ash. The white one is the soda ash. The colored one is the indigo dye. And then the inside here, you should see that we have a few rubber bands and some twine. So let's talk about how to set up our indigo vat. So I have my container here with a lid and full of warm water, roughly a gallon of warm water. I have a spoon to stir. I have my white bag of soda ash, and I have my indigo dye for this step. So go ahead and open the lid of your container, and you are going to add this entire bag of soda ash to our warm water until it is dissolved. So once you've added your soda ash, go ahead and stir until your soda ash is dissolved. All right, mine looks really dissolved. So I just want to talk briefly about why we are using soda ash in our vat here. So soda ash actually acts as a fixative with our dye to adhere onto the fabric. So if you can see on my sleeves here, we have a really dark blue. It would just be a little bit lighter blue and it wouldn't stick as nicely to our fabric. It would still work, it just wouldn't bring out these really bright hues. So once you have dissolved all of your soda ash, you can go ahead and grab your packet of indigo dye. And I don't want you to dump it in quite yet because I just have a few instructions before we do that. So as a natural dye, indigo is super special. It's really magical. There's actually this beautiful process that happens when you pull your fabric out. It'll be green, and as the air hits it, it will turn blue. So in order to keep our vat green, we want to prevent any air coming into our vat. So in order to prevent that, as we're mixing this in, we want to stir very slowly and in one direction. We don't want to be lapping, creating any drips or any air pockets. We're really going to be focusing on like an up and down motion and a very gentle, very slow stir. Okay, so once you feel confident, you might want to practice that a few times with just the water in your vat, but once you feel like you have that down, go ahead and add your indigo dye until it is completely dissolved. It's kind of hard to tell, but you'll be able to kind of feel if it's not super gritty on the bottom of your vat, you have successfully added all of your indigo and had that dissolve. Get this as close to the water as possible and just drop it in. And again, that nice, slow, one direction stir until it is completely dissolved. So as you're stirring, you might find that you have some chunks or some flakes at the top. That is totally fine. It actually means you're doing this exactly right. That is called flour. It builds at the top. It's just a natural thing that occurs when you add indigo to water. So at this point, I've been stirring for about 1.5 minutes and everything looks pretty good. All those flakes I'm just gonna let bloom at the top. I'm going to very carefully get my spoon out of here and then I'm going to cover this, okay? So we're gonna let this sit for about 20 minutes so our indigo dye can fully saturate. All right, for this next step, you're going to want to grab your dyeables. Remember, we're using natural fibers, so these are all 100% cotton. You're gonna want to grab your twine and you're gonna want to grab your rubber bands. So if you have ever tie-dyed before, you probably know there are tons of different techniques involved in tie-dyeing. There's a really traditional technique called shibori. It's a Japanese technique that I like to use a lot with indigo dye because it creates really beautiful patterns. So this first technique I'm going to talk you through is called kanoko. It is a traditional shibori technique, and you probably have used this if you've ever tie-dyed before. It's the twist. You find a center and twist, and then you form a kind of a spiral around that. So that's actually called kanoko. It's based off a Japanese technique of shibori. So I'm going to find a center. It doesn't have to be in the actual center, but I'm going to find a center, and I'm going to pinch and twist. So pinch and twist. You'll see this spiral start to form. Pinch and twist. Keep going. I kind of like to keep one hand down so I can kind of guide this into a little, almost like a cinnamon bun or a cinnabon, that's what they're called. A nice little roll. And we are going to take our rubber bands. You might need 2 or 3 for this. And we are going to just secure this roll in place. So this again is called kanoko, and that is our first type of shibori. Our second pattern today is called arashi. It's another traditional technique, and it's again kind of creating a little bit of a center, but you're going to pick that off the table. I always think of this as like a little ghost. You can do this with either rubber bands or you can do this with our twine. I'm going to teach you how to do it with your twine. If you were to do it with rubber bands, you would just secure a rubber band, secure another rubber band, all the way down to kind of create a little rocket looking ghost head thing. But if you're using your twine, I included enough in this so you can wrap all the way down and hopefully all the way back up. So I'm going to tie just a little head here just to secure this in place. And I'm going to, with pretty even tension here, twirl all the way down. So we're just kind of creating a bind here. So our fabric is really squished together. And again, this one's called arashi. So I'm going to leave a little tail on mine so I can work all the way back up again. And then tie it to that little tail we have. And that's our arashi technique. For our mask, my favorite technique to use is just one I kind of created on my own. So I just kind of bunched up the fabric, fold it in half, and I use a rubber band to secure it in place. If you're feeling spicy, you can add another one. And it's super simple. It'll create a really beautiful pattern. Okay, once you have your pieces tied and binded together, you are going to want to pre-soak them. So I actually just have a bucket of water here. You could do this in your sink. You could do this outside in a river if you really wanted to get fully naturey with it. But we're just going to soak our fabric until it is wet all the way through. Go ahead and pop on your gloves really quick. All right, so I can tell that my fabric is fully soaked just because it's kind of sunk to the bottom, and if I were to pick it up, there'd be a lot of water dripping. So I'm gonna squeeze all that excess water because, again, we don't want to introduce any new air into our vat. So just squeezing out until it's not dripping any water. So do that to all of your fabric. So the reason why we actually soaked our fabric is so that our dye has an easier time penetrating into our fiber. So once you have those soaked, go ahead and take the lid off of your indigo vat right now. If you can see, I have a few little flakes still at the top. That's totally fine. I'm actually just going to use my spoon here to kind of create a point of entrance. So trying to get a spot where there aren't a ton of flakes. It's okay if there are, but we're just trying to create a spot of entry. All right. And I'm going to just very slowly add my fabric. Trying not to create any big splashes. And then we're going to cover it up as soon as possible, as soon as you have all your fabric in here, and let it sit for about 9 minutes. So go ahead and set a timer for about 7 to 10 minutes, anywhere in there. And I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about some indigo fun facts while we're waiting for our vat to do its magic. Indigo has been around for about 3,000 years, and at the time when it was discovered, it was used only to dye luxury goods, which I think is pretty ironic now, since all of us have indigo in our closet, indigo dyed items in our closet. I'm thinking specifically of any denim you have, any jeans, any denim jackets, that kind of stuff definitely is still used with indigo dye, which is super cool because it's a natural dye. So if you smelled your vat and it smelled a little familiar but you couldn't place it, smell it again once you go back in and think about a fresh pair of jeans. I like to take a peek at my indigo about 7 minutes into the process. And if you're wearing long sleeves, you might want to just roll them up just in case. Hopefully we have gloves that are long enough. So go ahead and fish around. We'll want to squeeze. See how I'm kind of, hopefully you can see I'm kind of doing this motion. I'm squeezing the fabric underneath the water. Again, so we don't have a whole lot of oxygen that's being introduced into our vat. So I'm squeezing, and see that beautiful green color? Oh, I love this. It's magical every time. It is green, it's going to oxidize, and you can kind of see it in my hands. It's oxidizing to this beautiful blue color. So go ahead and take off the bindings to let this fully hit the air. So go ahead and set your designs off to the side somewhere so it can fully let the air hit it. And I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of my vat. Take all the bindings off of our fabric here to let everything fully get penetrated by the oxygen. And I love watching this every time. It doesn't get old. Watching this green turn to blue. Beautiful. So you'll want to let your pieces sit out until they are fully blue. I still see a few spots over here that are just a little bit, hopefully you can see that, they're just a little bit green. So I'm gonna let this sit out just a little bit till everything is nice and blue. Mine's looking pretty good here. I don't see any green spots. So the last step today is to rinse your pieces until they are running clear. Usually it doesn't take a whole lot of rinsing, but sometimes it does, depending on how long you let your pieces sit in there and how saturated that dye got. So rinse until they run clear, and then you can wash and dry them like normal. Just went and rinsed my designs. I'm gonna actually hang them up, but look how beautiful they are. They're so fun. Ugh, stunning. So now that you have your vat, you can actually dye a ton of different items. This will keep for about a week. And think about all the white shirts that you have, anything that has a stain on it, baby onesies, tea towels, sweaty old shirts that you don't want to wear anymore because they have stains on them. Pop them in your indigo dye vat and you'll have a completely new wardrobe. Trust me, about 90% of what I wear at one point was white. So I hope you enjoyed learning about indigo dye, and I cannot wait to see what you have created. If you'd like to share with me, go ahead and tag me at Aerow Handmade, spelled A-E-R-O-W, and I'd love to see what you created. Thank you so much.